He treated the wounds of others until they merged into one, the most dangerous of all. Dr. Rothwell's surrogate trauma therapy. Melbourne lay outside the office window, wrapped in the soft glow of streetlights glimmering in the puddles. Inside, it was quiet, only the steady hum of the air conditioner and the faint scent of antiseptic. Dr. David Rothwell sat at his desk, staring at a folder marked Alice M. 29. In the woman's eyes in the photo was that same vacant gleam he remembered from case K-19. Back then, he'd lost a patient because he couldn't understand what he was feeling. That gaze had never left him. Today, he'd seen it again, and this time he had a way not to fail. David set up the camera and sat opposite the patient. Julia, standing behind the lens, whispered, "Tell her the procedure may cause temporary side effects." He repeated the phrase without glancing at the paper, adding, "You can stop it at any time. Do you agree?" "Yes," Alice answered almost in a whisper. He powered on the equipment. In the window's reflection, the outline of the helmet on her head caught the light. The thin whine of the EEG spread through the room. The air smelt faintly of ozone. His fingers on the control panel trembled slightly. Wave patterns began to appear on the screen. Alice's eyes narrowed just a little, her breathing steadied. Her lips barely moved, repeating, "It's all right, it's all right." A minute later, David cut the power and removed the helmet. The woman looked up, her eyes held a surprised relief. "It's all right," he echoed her unconsciously, not noticing Julia stiffen. "Thank you, doctor," Alice said, and left. When the door closed, David turned the camera toward himself. Transfer complete. Symptoms have disappeared. Initiating the real living phase. He knew that tonight he would hear the screech of brakes, smell the wet asphalt, and taste blood in his mouth. He would live through her accident to the very end. In the dim window glass, his face reflected back. A shadow, faint but already foreign, slid into the corner of the reflection and vanished. The morning began with a silence that carried too much meaning. David sat at the kitchen table, a notebook of night scribbles spread before him. He had no memory of writing them. The handwriting shifted from rounded, almost childlike letters to sharp, angular strokes, like in military reports. In one sentence, he recognized 3 different scripts, none of them his own. 2 former patients were waiting for their checkups at the clinic. The first, a young man, spoke of his new job and the joy of driving. David nodded, but caught himself unconsciously mirroring the man's gesture, sliding his palm over his knee, exactly as the patient had done in his early treatment sessions. The second, a middle-aged woman, cheerfully reported she was sleeping through the night again. When she laughed, David smiled, with the same slightly tense smile she had once used to hide her anxiety. Her gaze lingered on him for a second, as though she recognized something in her face but couldn't name it. After they left, he pressed the elevator button, but when the doors opened, he stayed put. Inside was stuffy, the light flickering. His palms grew damp. He turned toward the stairs instead. Back in his office, he sat down at his desk and noticed Julia watching him a little longer than usual. "What?" he asked without looking up. "It's just, you don't seem like yourself today," she said quietly. Later, when he went to the lab, Julia opened a new document on the computer. The header read, "Draft for IRB Ethics Committee Submission." She stared at the blank screen for a long time before typing, "The subject is exhibiting signs of." That evening, David leafed through the notebook. Between therapy notes, he found a line written in a child's hand. "It's all right. It's all right." He didn't remember writing it, but deep inside he felt a foreign certainty, warm but not his own. He woke before dawn, sensing someone had been speaking in the room. On the nightstand lay his recorder. David pressed play. First came his own voice, muffled and tired. Beneath it, like an underwater current, ran another, a barely audible whisper, repeating phrases in an unfamiliar slang he recognized from a veteran patient. Between the layers slid a word he couldn't translate, but which clenched something deep inside him. He arrived at the clinic earlier than usual. On his desk lay a letter from the IRB. All sessions suspended until review is complete. Possible protocol violations and operator risk. He stared at the stamp for a long moment, then slipped the letter into a drawer. In the database, he changed the project status to Emergency Continuation, Medical Necessity. In the hallway, the smell of burnt rubber caught him. Somewhere below, a car was being repaired. Suddenly, headlights flashed in his mind. Wet asphalt, the shriek of brakes. He gripped the railing until the smell faded. Later, on the way to a patient, a loud metallic bang rang out. The elevator had jammed between floors. Instantly, his body reacted like under fire. He crouched, arms over his head. It took seconds to remember where he was. That evening, after he'd gone home, Julia entered the lab. Logs from the last session still glowed on the monitor. She inserted her personal drive and began copying the data. Her hands trembled, but she didn't stop. That night, he turned on the recorder again. "Patients continue to recover," he said quietly. "But the traumas behave differently now. They seek each other out." In that moment, a soft yes joined his voice, not his own, but in the same timbre. He switched off the recorder, and in the silence of the office, it seemed, for a second, that someone kept speaking, without any recording at all. The first hint came from a long-discharged patient. He had come only to say thanks, but in conversation mentioned, "Sometimes I dream about you. You're standing in the corner of my room, silent, but on your face is the same terror I had before the treatment." He said it like a joke, but doubt flickered in his eyes. Was it really a dream? Days later, a young woman confessed something similar. That's when David realized the trauma hadn't only stayed in him, it was leaking back out. That night, he tried to purge it. He donned the helmet, connected the system without a patient, and entered the command reset. His fingers flew over the keys, but the device shuddered, the screen flickered, and parameters adjusted themselves. A code appeared, one he hadn't typed. The tone deepened, as if the machine was responding to his attempt. He tore off the helmet and flung it aside. Day by day, his body betrayed more of the foreign. He found himself writing with his left hand, in Alice's neat, precise script. Military idioms crept into his speech. Hold the sector, keep the sight. Sometimes, lost in thought, he sat with knees drawn to his chest, the posture of a boy who'd survived a fire. Julia saw it all, first as an observer, then as someone growing afraid. Once, she found him asleep at his desk, left hand gripping a pen, the notebook filled page after page with, "It's all right, it's all right." That evening, she called a former colleague at a university clinic. Her voice shook. "This isn't research anymore. He is changing. The device runs on its own, and I think it, or something, is controlling the process." When she hung up, she decided for the first time that if David didn't stop himself, she would end the work at any cost. The clinic had been empty for a week. David no longer took patients, but the lab lights burned through the night. He found Michael Rayner's number and called. The man answered immediately. "If this is about the therapy, I thought you'd shut it down." "This is something else," David said. "I need your help." They met in the evening. Rain streaked the office windows. Michael sat opposite him, hands on his knees. "A year ago, you pulled me out of hell," he began. "After the blast, I was the only one left alive. The rest, Tom, Garrett, Lucas..." He paused, testing if he could say another name. "I should have died with them. Since then, I've been looking for a way to repay the debt. If this is my chance, I'm ready." "You don't understand," David cut in. "These aren't just fears. It's everything at once. Hundreds of stories woven into one. And you want me to be the container." If it stays in me, it will break out. In you, you can hold it. You can take the hit." Michael nodded, but in his eyes there was more acceptance than agreement. When he left to prepare, Julia entered the lab. "I won't let you do this," she said. "You think there's a choice?" He looked up from the panel. "It's the trolley problem. One or all. Or maybe you're just afraid," she shot back. She stepped to the equipment rack, pulled the amplifier fuse, and quietly lowered the flow limit. "One more step and I'm calling the regulator," she said, staring at him. David stayed silent. His gaze made it clear the decision was already made, but now there was more anger than certainty. He turned to the monitor, and for a moment it seemed the screen reflected not his face, but something assembled from many others. The lab glowed with cold white light, cut off from the rest of the world. Two chairs faced each other, with a block of equipment between them, its green indicators pulsing. Michael sat still but tense, like a soldier before battle. David checked the connections, placed the helmets, and activated the system. Lines of activity raced across the screen. For the first few seconds, everything went to plan. Then the machine emitted a sharp tone and raised the flow above the set limit. Julia, standing by the wall, felt a chill crawl over her skin. She knew the limit had been reduced, but the system ignored it. The metatrauma seemed to reach for its target on its own. The stream split. The main mass surged toward Michael, his face twisted as if he were seeing fire, drowning, and hearing a child cry all at once. But some dark, jagged fragments snagged in David. At that moment, his hand brushed Julia's. She flinched. A rush of alien images flared in her mind. Wet road, metallic taste, an unfamiliar voice whispering in a language she didn't know. David felt himself emptied, almost. All that remained was the panic reflex to the transfer process itself. Just looking at the device was enough to throw his heartbeat off rhythm. He removed Michael's helmet. The man sat breathing hard, then lifted his head and said, "It's all right," in exactly Alice's voice. Then, without changing tone, he added, "Hold the sector," in the veteran's voice. His shoulders took the posture David had seen in the boy who survived the fire. Julia slowly backed toward the door. She understood the core had gone into Michael, but fragments were now in David, and possibly in herself. The machine's indicators flickered then, as if confirming that the chain could no longer be broken. 8 months later, in the place of David Rothwell's closed clinic, the Center for Integrative Psychotherapy of Dr. Michael Rayner opened. A bright sign, a spacious lobby, soft chairs, everything looked open and safe. Michael saw patients daily. He claimed to have developed distributed therapy, a new method in which traumas don't disappear but are shared among carriers, so no one bears the whole burden alone. His voice was calm, but sometimes shifted for a split second, soft like Alice's, or clipped and commanding like the veteran's. One day, Julia came by under the pretense of delivering medical files. She noticed odd things. In the waiting room, a man in his 40s spoke to his wife and suddenly said, in a child's voice, "It's all right, it's all right." A young nurse, passing by, unconsciously pressed a finger to her lips, a gesture Julia remembered from another patient, a survivor of combat. No one seemed to notice. That same day, she received a letter from the IRB. Curt, cold. Investigation initiated. Evidence insufficient for immediate intervention. Monitoring will continue. Reading it, she understood. It was too late. The cycle had already multiplied. She reached Michael's office. He rose to greet her, and in his eyes flickered something familiar, the same layered shadow that had once looked out at her from David's face. "Will you stay?" he asked with a gentle smile. Julia glanced back at the door. In the lobby, someone was quietly humming a stranger's tune, while another patient rhythmically clenched a fist as if gripping an invisible weapon. She closed the door, leaving her bag on the chair. "Yes," she said, "I'll stay." It sounded less like agreement to work and more like a promise. She knew if anyone could still stop the spread, it would have to be someone already carrying a fragment of it inside.